SpexMojo.com See the Difference presents Mood of the State, co-sponsored by Rajdeep Builders.
Hello and welcome to a very special episode. Specs Mojo See the Difference present Mood of the State in association with Rajdeep Builders. हो कार्यक्रमाक सुरुवात करच्या पयलीं एक सांगून दिसता की पयलीं मेगा ब्रॉडकास्ट पळयलो तुमी ताच्या नंतर फाटले 4 दीस तुमी मूड ऑफ द स्टेट्स ब्रेकअप पळयता ऑफ युअर कॉन्स्टिट्युएन्सी. एक काणी याद जाता म्हाका तो पयलीं कार्यक्रम सुरू करच्या पयलीं ती काणी सांगता की जेन्ना म्हजो प्रिलिमेचो रिजल्ट येतालो तेन्ना ऑब्वियसली इट यूज टू बी अ वेकअप कॉल फॉर मी. बरेचदा वेदर यू आर इन द मे बी अ सेकंड क्लास और फर्स्ट क्लास और डिस्टिंक्शन आसता मातसो कॉन्फिडन्स वाडटालो बिकॉज यू ऑलवेज वूड डू बेटर इन द मेन एक्झाम्स. मूड ऑफ द स्टेटाचे फायंडींग पळयत आनी जो रिस्पॉन्स म्हाका पर्सनली मेळ्ळा किंवा प्रुडंटाक मेळ्ळा तो जर पळयत जाल्यार आय थिंक दीस इंडीड वॉज अ प्रिलिम रिजल्ट फॉर अ लॉट ऑफ people who are safe obviously bare karpak jay so that they serve the community. More importantly, who are unsafe, they have a lot of work, and people who are 50-50, I think it's really a wake-up call to serve the constituents. And just to roll up this show and introduce my guest, on my right-hand side, I have Professor Nilesh Borde, Goa Business School, Goa University. Tasha, on my left-hand side is Pramod Acharya, editor at Prudent Media. Bakaista, Nilesh has given the data points, and obviously Pramod has given a lot of gyan in terms of breaking up the political sense. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. And just to start with the first question, and obviously जेन्ना सर्वे घेवन वयता तेन्ना प्रश्न कितें आसता हे गरजेचें आसता आणि आय थिंक निलेश वूड बी इन अ बेटर पोजिशन टू आन्सर विथ दिस.
Every time you go for in research, you go for a primary data, there are a lot of problems that people would tend to kind of face. And one of the problems that people tend to face, or the researchers tend to face, is desirability, giving right answers, giving honest answers. And so your instrument has to be designed in such a manner that it becomes both reliable and it becomes valid, which is what we call in research methodology as reliability and validity factor. And so you have to design questions in such manner. So there is something called as an internal control in every instrument. So every instrument would have questions asked in such a manner that it would kind of take a proper control over each other. So people do not either randomly answer the questions, or second point is people honestly answer the question. And if any point in time people have been dishonest in answering the question, it gets captured into the data. That is the most important, and that's the art. And so I want to also thank, along with this, my colleague from Goa Business School, Professor Purva Hegde Desai, who was a very big instrument in designing this questionnaire that was used for this Mood of the State survey. Going ahead, you need to understand that in questionnaires you make it very clear, and you ask the questions in different spaces so that a person is not into that frame of mind while answering. So there is a particular question asked at the beginning, and a complementary question that basically tries to tell you whether he has honestly answered that very important question or randomly answered that important question. You ask another question, but after giving it a gap, because human mind can't really recollect what you have answered some time back. That is the most important part. So designing a questionnaire is an art. And that is exactly what was followed. Obviously, thanks to someone like Pramod, who has been into the field of politics and understands politics much better than probably anybody here. And so therefore, he was he gave a lot of inputs in terms of what kind of data that needs to get elicited, which is a very important thing. So just give you one of the things that Pramod, for example, helped. So one question that I was going to ask was that I recommended Pramod, I still remember, is Pramod, why don't we ask voters a question? Would you still like to vote a candidate other than BJP with BJP government in center? Pramod did not even take a second to say, no, Nilesh, will not answer that because it will lead people to answering. So even if they don't have that in their mind, while answering, this will block their mind. Okay. And it was amazing. And I said yes, it would bring in a kind of desirability which would bring in bias in the data. And we immediately got rid of it. Or for example, a very good input that came in from someone like Professor Purva, and again seconded by Pramod, was, why don't we shift the schemes? When we receive schemes in kind and receive schemes in cash. And I said, yes, that's such an important thing to really look at. So do people prefer cash coming into the account, or do people prefer those freebies coming in kind. It was a very interesting question to look at. So questionnaire designing in that sense were a very rigorous exercise, and the kind of time that Pramod and I have spent on it was tremendous. And what helped was a great amount of understanding of political scenario in Goa by Pramod. So it just helped in designing that questionnaire. So the questionnaire is reliable, the questionnaire is valid, and more importantly, the questionnaire has got enough internal controls that basically guard against random answering and dishonest answering. So therefore, the kind of data, and that's the reason why Prudent surveys, whenever they come out with the numbers, those numbers are always more often than not reliable. And so even this data that has come out and the survey that has come out, I must say this to the people who probably understand research, are at almost about 95 to 99% level of confidence. And so therefore, that's the level of confidence which the data comes out.
Okay, thank you very much, Nilesh, because answering and obviously giving the inputs of Pramod as well. Now, Pramod, म्हाका तुका विचारपाक जाय is Prudent survey has always been in bang on, because obviously तो फिल्डार वचून जाता, sentiments लोकांचे आमी रजिस्टर करता, बरोचसो हार्डवर्क वता when in terms of framing, जे निलेशान सुद्धा सांगलें. डेटा कलेक्शन इज इम्पॉर्टंट, डेटा प्रोसेसिंग हाजेर आमी डिटेल ऑब्वियसली वचया. म्हाका एकूच विचारूंक जाय की आतां जे बरेचशे जाण आरोप करता आमचेर की आमी एसी स्टुडियोन बसून हो प्रोग्राम शूट करता, हो सर्वे आमी एसी स्टुडियोन बसून केला काय, क्वेश्चन फ्रेम केला बट आमीच खंय तरी आन्सर केलें. वॉट इज युअर रिस्पॉन्स ऑन दिस?
पयली गजाल म्हळ्यार म्हाका निलेश गरजे परस चड क्रेडीट दिता, कारण वी हॅव वर्क टुगेदर फॉर मोर देन अ डिकेड नाव, म्हाका दिसता ऑलमोस्ट 12 वर्सां. सो एक तप जालें. सो एका तपा उपरांत आय ब्लायंडली ट्रस्ट देम. येस, वी रिहॅश दी क्वेश्चनर अकॉर्डिंग टू द सिच्युएशन. 5 वर्सां भितर कितें बदल जाल्यात, परिस्थिती खंय पावल्या, कोण खंय पावला, ह्या गजालींचेर आमी डेफिनेटली भर दितात आनी ते प्रॅक्टिकल करंट अफेर्स आनी कंटेम्पररी गजाली तातूंत भितर एड करतात अनडाउटेडली. बट वन थिंग आय हॅव टू से दीस अगेन एंड अगेन इज हेड्स ऑफ टू Nilesh and his team, कारण till date we have not got even one survey wrong. We might एक सीट हांगा चुकलें किंवा एक सीट थंय चुकलें अशें जाल्लें आसत, but we have never got the overall survey wrong, overall sentiment wrong, or वारें खंय व्हांवता ती वाऱ्याची दिशा सांगपाक आमी केन्नाच चुकले नात. आनी the basic reason behind it, and I am coming to your question now, the basic reason behind it की आमी प्रत्येक खेपेक जो सर्वे केला तो आमी डोर टू डोर केला. म्हळ्यार फ्रॉम सॅम्पल सिलेक्शन ते तुगेले फायनल डेटा एनालिसीस मेरेन. हांव खूब फावटी खूब जाणां दिसता की कोणालो तरी पर्सनल बायस तातूंत भितर आयला काय कितें, किंवा आनी कोणाची तरी विशफूल थिंकींग तातूंत भितर आयला काय कितें. एक गजाल की जो मेरेन निलेश आमकां फायनल, निलेश आनी ताजी टीम आमकां फायनल डेटा एनालिसीस करून, डेटा क्लीन करून, क्रॉस टॅब्युलेशन्स करून जो मेरेन आमकां फायनल ग्राफ्स प्रेजेंट करना, तो मेरेन आमकां सुद्दां खबर आसना की एक्चुअल रिजल्ट्स कितें आयल्यात ते. दॅट टीम इवन कोणाकूच म्हाका दिसता इन दॅट एंटायर चेन कोणाकूच कंप्लीट पिक्चर खबर आसना, कारण देर इज अ टीम जी डोर टू डोर वचून सर्वे करता, दुसरी जी क्रॉस टॅब्युलेशन्स आनी डेटा एनालिसीस करता, आनी तिसरी जी आमी तो डेटा घेवन मागीर ताजेर स्टुडियो प्रोडक्शन आनी लोकां मेरेन तो कसो बरे आनी इफेक्टीव रितीन पावोवचो हाजेर भर दितात. सो टू आन्सर दॅट क्वेश्चन, डेफिनेटली डोर टू डोर आमी एकाच कारणा खातीर करतात, आनी खंयच आमी कोणूच स्टुडियो भितर बसून एसी स्टुडियोत बसून प्रोग्राम करतात, पण एसी स्टुडियोंतल्यान आमी डोर टू डोर करपाक शकनात. खुबशे सर्वे सद्याक राजकीय पक्ष करतात. तुमी पळयलां आसतलें की ते फोन करतात आनी फोनार प्रश्न विचारतात. आमी फोनाचेर एकूचदां केल्लो, इफ आय एम नॉट मिस्टेकन, ऑलमोस्ट वन इयर बॅक, जेन्ना सामकें कोविडाचें सिच्युएशन आशिल्लें, तेन्नाच आमी IVR वापरून एकदां सर्वे केल्लो मूड ऑफ द स्टेट. अदरवायज आमी फोनाचेर केन्नाच केलो ना. आनी आमचो सर्वे असो आसता की जो मनीस तुमच्या दाराक येता तो मनीस काडून ते डिवायस जे आसा, ती टॅब आसूं किंवा मोबायल आसूं, सरळ तुमच्या हातांत येता. आमी तुमचें नांव विचारनात, आमी तुमची ईमेल विचारनात, आमी तुमचो फोन नंबर विचारनात. आनी आमची अपेक्षा इतलीच आसता की जे क्वेश्चनर तुमी भरतात ते प्रामाणीकपणान भरचे आनी खरो सेंटिमेंट जो आसा तो गोंया कडेन आनी गोंयकारा कडेन पावोवचो. सो तुमचे वोट जितले सिक्रेट आसता तितलोच सिक्रेट हो डेटा आसा. आयची घडयेक म्हाका सुद्दां खबर ना जी सॅम्पल्स आमी घेतल्यात कोणें कितें उत्तर दिलें तें. एकदां तुमी सबमीट म्हण ताजेर टायप क्लिक केलें की नोबडी नोस वॉट यू हॅव आन्सर्ड. सो युअर डेटा or your response is as secret as your vote.
Anonymity and secrecy is the basic reason for the data being factual.
You get a frank answer from
Absolutely, because
individual.
people are not scared. Ata, for example, I want to speak something against the chief minister. I'm not scared because I know that whatever I speak will be completely anonymous, and people who are collecting data will also not know
Correct.
who has said this. That is the most important part.
Okay, Pramod, I want to ask you one more thing is, data collection obviously is important. How was the approach done? For example, 40 constituencies, वेगवेगळे booths असा. आम्ही was it की बाबा एक काहीतरी hotspot गेले आपण maybe marketan गेले where you get different samples there together. तसो approach असलो,
I think
booth-wise
Nilesh is
approach
the best
असलो.
person to answer that because ताणी जो फॉर्म्युला तयार केल्लो तो फॉर्म्युला असो आशिल्लो तो जितलो रॅन्डम आसा तितलो स्पेसिफिक आसा. सॅम्पलिंग तुका रॅन्डम जरी असलें तरी ते प्रत्येक बूथ कव्हर करता. निलेश, if you can.
I think both, even the analysis thereafter.
Yeah. So I think it's a very important thing that there has to be randomness, because if there is no randomness, then you tend to bring in bias. Let's take one example. Let us say, for example, if I go and collect data only from one particular locality which is completely in favor of a particular candidate, and if I collect that entire data from that particular community or that particular locality, what will happen is that the results will get unnecessarily skewed towards or in favor of one particular person. So there has to be randomness. So where a person's gender, person's caste, person's religion is never looked at before figuring out or asking the person the questions. That's the first part. Now, how do you bring a randomness? I'll give you a very simple example. You go to a constituency which has, let us say, got about 28,000 voters. And let us say, for example, I mean, a sample size was much larger. Pramod will speak about that a bit later, but I'm just giving it as an example. I repeat, it's an example. So let us say, for example, I'm taking per constituency a sample of 100. So if there are 28,000 voters in a particular constituency, and if the sample size is 100, I get an interval called 280. How do I get that? 28,000 divided by 100. Now what I do is that I use Excel and I create a random number. That's the first thing that I do. So for example, if the first random number I put in a Excel and I get a random number, say 632. And this 632, so I take the 632nd person on the electoral roll as my sample, first sample. And now I start adding 280 to this. So first I take 632nd, then I take 912, then I take 1192. So I keep adding those 280 into it in order to get my next person. And what is more important is, for some reason, I mean, I must also say this, that every time you go to that particular person's house, that person might not be available. Now,
Correct.
It is a very clear instruction to the person who is collecting data that if a person whom you go to collect is not available at that point in time, there are two things that you need to do. Number one, try approaching him again. That's the first thing. Even on a second visit, because now there is a time gap also, if that person is still not available, then you go to his immediate neighbor.
Okay.
You don't, so that immediate neighbor could also be 730 on a roll, but you go to his immediate neighbor. The logic is what? In research, we get up and say, if one locality, there is always a very high probability that two neighbors would tend to think alike when it comes to its political affiliations and political sentiment. For a reason that they might be discussing in their free time and things like that. But again, as I said, those things happen very rarely, because first that person has to go and approach the same person on the sample again. If it is not available, only then, the second time, you go to the immediate next door neighbor in order to figure out in order to get the questions answered. What happens when you have a class interval like this and the sample size is small as that? The entire data gets strewn over, and so therefore, as Pramod says, because of this, a person in every booth is captured, person of every gender is captured, person of every caste is captured, person of every religion is captured. So all those points here, a person of every occupation, person of every educational qualification, everything possible, if you notice, gets captured because the data is random.
Okay.
Now that's the most important part, and it has to be, see, this is something that has to be followed absolutely sincerely, because if this is not followed sincerely, your entire data can go for a toss. Yes, the questionnaire does have its own internal controls to find that out as well, right? And I must be extremely proud to tell you this, and all credit to Pramod and his team. The data collected was so good that all my internal controls, in spite of triggering them, at no point in time we got a point that something has got fudged somewhere, something has got cooked somewhere, or at some point in time a particular data is actually not correct.
SpecsMojo.com See the Difference presents Mood of the State, co-sponsored by Rajdeep Builders. SpecsMojo.com See the Difference presents Mood of the State, co-sponsored by Rajdeep Builders.
आम्ही collection of sample म्हणतात. Again, important is processing. And I think you and your team has the upper hand in processing the data. फाटले काही surveys we worked together, Prudent and obviously Goa universities worked together, and we've got the best results out. We've always been bang on. Processing of data, what is the kind of approach? Because हांव विचारता की खंय तरी कोणाक तरी दिसता ते केले ऍड केले ना. We have seen the collection. How do we process the data? Cleaning of data जे आम्ही म्हणता.
Hi. So we need to always remember this, that we use a software to analyze this statistically. And a software will never understand your names and numbers, your names and your letters that you write. So for example, your chief ministerial candidate, Pramod Sawant, somebody writes Vishwajit Rane, somebody says Digambar Kamath. Software can't read that. And so therefore what needs to happen is that everything now needs to get cleaned. Cleaned means you've got to code it. So for example, even when I write gender, male, female, the computer cannot read male and female. So if I have to perform a statistical analysis with it, I have to convert them into a number. So the male becomes, for example, coded as 1, female coded as 2. And then that entire data gets coded. And in this particular fashion, I will tell you there were about 64 variables that we had in our questionnaire. Okay. Now these 64 variables had to kind of get cleaned. And so there are some points where, for example, you do not have the data available. So there are, so always there is an extra amount of data that is collected because there is every possibility that some forms might not be filled correctly. Some forms might, a person must have not filled at all and must have just pressed submitted. Those kind of things happen. So all the data, the entire data which has been collected has to actually go through and it has to get cleaned. Now once this data is cleaned and converted into numbers, then this data is processed and analyzed, by which you then create cross tabs. You can perform any sort of statistical this. So for example, I can also use this data in order to create some sort of a logistic equation to tell you what is the probability of a particular person getting elected or a person not getting elected. Right? Now, based on all this, and we also draw something called as a confidence intervals. Now, these confidence intervals, for us to be bang on, it has to be either 95% or 99%. Okay. In specific studies like the ones we are doing, because even a 10% level of confidence which is less can actually cause a little bit of problem and jitteriness in the decision. And so therefore we have to always work at those confidence levels. Now also, lot of people feel cross tabs are like, just kind of create rows and create columns. Now please understand that these are not manually created. These are created by software. And not only that, whether they are significant or not, whether they are things performed or not, there is a statistical analysis performed on that cross tab data in order to see whether the data is significant or not. I mean, I cannot just get up and call some candidate safe or unsafe just because there has been a 2% or 3% gap here and there. It has to be a significant gap. Now, to find out whether it is significant or not, there is a statistical analysis that is done on these cross tabs to find out if it's significant. And then the data is interpreted and given to Pramod, and Pramod then does a political theorization out of it.
Okay, two things you have spoken is one is sentiment and political theorizing or maybe political decoding of it. Now, while we were doing survey, because I knew what was the time frame, one major shift that was Mr. Luisin Falero joining the TMC.
Correct.
While we were doing, he was in the Congress. In the meantime, he was nowhere, and obviously by the end of the survey, he joined Trinamool. Pramod, म्हाका तुका विचारूंक जाय is the political sentiment that you gauged while this shift was happening. I will ask Nilesh later in terms of data analysis.
If I remember correctly, म्हाका दिसता आमी एकच दीस आमची field team data collect करताली when that was on the day of Luisin Falero's resignation as Congress MLA and from the primary membership of the Congress party. I think so data जो आमचे कडेन gather जाला as a data as a quantum of data तो भयंकर चड आसचो ना बट जो डेटा आसा तो डेफिनेटली डेटा आमचे कडेन आयला खूब जाण म्हणटात आनी आय विल ऑल्सो लव टू नो दीस फ्रॉम निलेश दॅट खूब जाण म्हणटात की लुइजिन फालेरो टीएमसीक गेल्ल्यान काँग्रेसीचो जो अपवर्ड ग्राफ आशिल्लो तो खंय तरी आडवतलो काय कितें कारण ते स्प्लिट जातले काय कितें सो आय थिंक फ्रॉम डेटा निलेश टू टेल अस वॉट द डेटा इज शोईंग ऑल्दो लेट मी मेक इट अगेन क्लियर दॅट एकाच दिसाक आमी डेटा कलेक्शन केला आणि ते डेटा कलेक्शन एका दिसा पुरतेच जे सॅम्पलिंग आशिल्ले तितले ऑन दॅट डे अवर फील्ड सर्वे एंडेड सो इट वॉज सॅम्पल म्हाका दिसता क्वांटम ताजो खूब व्हडलो आसचो ना but just to know the sentiment, I think it will be very interesting.
I think Nilesh, the fate of TMC or maybe Congress is in your hand now.
No, I knew you would put it like that
in terms of data.
No, I knew you would say that to me. Yeah, I must accept this fact before I start telling you this. It was statistically very insignificant numbers. Okay, so from statistics perspective, it is very insignificant, and one can't really make any strong inferences or logical conclusions from it. But from absolute numbers as a part of sentiments, and I must say this, that when you told me that we want to do this kind of a program, that is when I started looking at the data a bit more closely. And if you notice, I don't know, maybe that it is pure data. I'm not trying. I don't understand the politics behind it, but pure data shows, the sentiment shows that Luisin's going away from Congress is actually a boon for Congress because the data that filters in after that shows a lot of places where Digambar Kamath, who was proxy for Congress chief ministerial candidate and Congress sentiments, has been voted quite a bit. And mind you, those are not really constituencies which basically show which basically showed Congress as a main contender. So Congress is actually, in a way, it's a boon in disguise for Congress that Mr. Falero left Congress. Insignificant numbers, pure sentiments, and just the basic data. I don't understand the politics behind it.
Okay, I'll ask the person who understands the politics. Pramod, Luisin, so VRS, जे Congress usually म्हणता. Again, the data says these are the findings. What would you like to say, analyze?
म्हाका तो भितर दोन आस्पेक्ट दिसतात. पयलो आस्पेक्ट म्हळ्यार लोकांच्या तकल्याक सदांच कितें आशिल्लें की काँग्रेस आपलो मुख्यमंत्री पदाचो उमेदवार किंवा लिडरशीप इशू सॉल्व करपाक असमर्थ आसा. सो ज्या दिसाक लुइजिन फालेरो पक्षांतल्यान भायर गेलो एक गजाल स्पश्ट जाली की तो डिस्प्यूट काबार जालो कारण उरले कोण काँग्रेसी भितर आय एम सेइंग चीफ मिनिस्टरियल म्हणटा तशें प्रताप सिंग राणे कडेन काय आतां आमी चीफ मिनिस्टरियल म्हणून पळयनात रवी नायक दोन होड्यांचेर पांय दवरून आसा तो डेफिनेटली ताका काँग्रेसीचो चेहरो म्हणून पळोवपाची परिस्थितीत ना Alex Reginald, although senior, Digambar Kamath emerges as the clear face of the Congress once Luisin Falero is out. I think sometimes clarity solves most of the problems. आणि लुइजिन फालेरोची एक्झिटा उपरांत एक गजाल म्हाका दिसता एक क्रॉस सिग्नल गेले की काँग्रेसीचो चेहरो हो दिगंबर कामत दॅट इज वन फॅक्टर which that clarity factor which must have played in favor of Congress. For one simple reason की ती जी लॅक ऑफ क्लॅरिटी आसा त्या मुद्द्याचेर त्याच लॅक ऑफ क्लॅरिटीन काँग्रेसीक सदांच धाडायला आणि सरकार करपाचो सुद्दां जेन्ना प्रश्न आयलो तेन्ना त्याच लॅक ऑफ क्लॅरिटीचेर काँग्रेस घुस्पून पडली. सो म्हाका दिसता एक गजाल जी आसा ती आय थिंक दॅट इज व्हेरी इम्पॉर्टंट सडनली वोटराक दिसपा लागलें की काँग्रेसी भितरली कन्फ्युजन काबार जाला लिडरशिपीच्या बाबतींत. दुसरी जी गोष्ट आसा ती टीएमसी इज अ व्हेरी न्यू सिम्बॉल लोकांक संवकळना पक्षाची. लुईझीन फालेरो थंय गेल्यात आनी लुईझीन फालेरोचो जो एक प्रभाव आसा, दॅट प्रभाव इज नॉट बियॉन्ड 2-3 कॉन्स्टिट्युएन्सीज नावेली. पॅन गोवा तुगेलो प्रभाव काय ना. सो तसो पॅन गोवा ताजो इम्पॅक्ट पडपाक की लुईझीन फालेरो काँग्रेसींतल्यान गेलो म्हणून पॅन गोवा कितें तरी इम्पॅक्ट पडटलो अशी परिस्थिती ऑन ग्रावंड नाशिल्ली. पण तातूंतल्यान जो एक जशें निलेश म्हणटा काँग्रेसीक फायदो जावपा सारकी जी परिस्थिती जाली की पॅन गोवा एक सिग्नल गेलें की काँग्रेसीची सिच्युएशन खूब क्लियर गेलां. सो त्या क्लॅरिटींतल्यान म्हाका दिसता की ही जी आमकां टिल्ट दिसता, ऑल्दो स्टॅटिस्टिकली जशी निलेशान सांगलें, वी कॅनॉट सामकी अशी डेफिनेटली आमी ही गजाल म्हणपाक शकनात, बट जो सेंटिमेंट आमकां ज्या लिमिटेड स्टॅटिस्टिक्सा भितर दिसता, आय थिंक दॅट इज बेसिकली बिकॉज ऑफ दॅट क्लॅरिटी.
All these findings are in public domain now. How does candidates, all this maybe MLAs or aspirants म्हणा, how do people approach these findings now?
You're asking a wrong question to me. I can only tell them, trust, this is a factual data.
Okay.
If you are unsafe, you are unsafe. If you are safe, you are in a good position. But beyond that, what you should do politically, I think it's something that Pramod can answer.
Okay. Pramod, बरेच हॅपी अनहॅपी फीडबॅक आयलो आमकां प्रुडंटाचेर, सोशल मिडियाचेरूय बरेच आपापल्या प्लॅटफॉर्माचेर पळयला. म्हाका एकूच विचारूंक जाय की अगेन अप्रोचिंग this findings, taking it on a very good or maybe on a higher spirit, आय वूड से. एक विचारपाक जाय की बरेचदा आमी एक रिसंटली व्हायरल व्हिडिओ जाल्लो मदीं मनोहर पर्रीकराचो आदलो व्हिडिओ. तो म्हणटालो की बाबूश मोन्सेराताचे सॅटेलायट्स आर अक्रॉस गोवा with respect to the constituencies. आयज पळयतना तोच व्हिडिओ आमी जेन्ना एनालायज करता तेन्ना आयज ते मनोहर पर्रीकराच्या गॅलेक्सीन आसा आनी मोर इम्पॉर्टंटली प्रमोद सावंतांच्या ऑर्बिटान आसा. अशें जेन्ना तुमी पळयता तेन्ना हो डेटा, हे शिफ्ट, हे पॉलिटिकल जे खतखते आय वूड से, ह्याच्या कडेन तुमी कशें पळयता?
ना, म्हाका प्रामाणीकपणान एक दिसता, खूब जाणांनी फोन केले, जे सेफ आसात ते तो व्हिडिओ काडटा आमच्या एनालिसिसाचो आनी ताजेर स्वताची एडवर्टायज तयार करतात, व्हायरल करतात कॉन्स्टिट्युएन्सी भितर. जे अनसेफ आसात ते ऑब्वियसली पिकार आसात. सो जितल्या जाणांनी म्हाका फोन केलो, हांवें एकूच गजाल सांगली की डेटा इज डेटा. आनी हांवें त्या दीस प्रोग्रामाकूय सांगलां, देर मायट बी सम प्रोजेक्शन्स जातूंत म्हाकाच दिसना की हें खरें म्हणून, बट म्हाका हें खरें दिसना म्हणून डेटा हात लावप ही गजाल आमी फाटल्या 12 वर्सांक केन्नाच केली ना आनी आजूय करची ना. आनी एक गजाल सांगता की जेन्ना जेन्ना आमकां दिसता की अशें जातलें आनी डेटा जर दुसरी कितें तरी सांगता, इव्हेंच्युअली डेटा हेज टर्न रायट. म्हाका अजून याद आसा की फाटल्या इलेक्शनाक 2017च्या वी स्टक अवर नॅक आउट आनी आमी सांगिल्लें की मुख्यमंत्री तेन्नाचे लक्ष्मीकांत पार्सेकर इज अनसेफ म्हणून. खूब जाणांनी आमकां पिशां काडिल्लें की मुख्यमंत्र्यांनी पडटा आपल्या मतदारसंघाका म्हणून. खूब जाणांनी सामकी टिका केल्ली, अशीच टिका जाल्ली. कांय जाणांक दिशिल्लें की मुद्दाम आमी कितें तरी चित्र तयार करपा खातीर अशें करतात बी म्हणून. बट व्हेरी फ्रँकली तो डेटा आमकां जी गजाल सांगतालो तीच गजाल आमी प्रामाणीकपणान टीव्हीर सांगिल्ली. आजूय तेच जाला. त्या डेटाचें कितें जालें तें सगळ्यांक खबर आसा, ताजी आनी हांव उजळणी परत करना. पूण तीच परिस्थिती आज आसा. आज डेटा जसो आयला तसो आमी तुमचे मुखार दवरला. सो मुगेले सदांच जितले जाणांनी म्हाका फोन केले तांकां हांवें एकच गजाल सांगली, एक, यू कॅन लर्न फ्रॉम दीस डेटा बिकॉज दीस इज नॉट अ प्री-पोल सर्वे, दीस इज मूड ऑफ द स्टेट. अजून इलेक्शनाक 3-4 म्हयने आसात. तुमी तुमच्या कामगिरी भितर सुदारणा करपाक शकतात. यू कॅन ट्राय टू डू समथींग, स्ट्रगल टू डू समथींग सो दॅट यू इम्प्रूव युअर ग्राफ. नंबर 1. दुसरी, जर तुमकां दिसता की ह्या सर्वे भितर कांय अर्थ ना, दीस सर्वे इज युजलेस, दीस सर्वे इज अ फ्रॉड, वाय डू यू वरी?
करेक्ट.
देन यू टेक युअर ओन कंक्लुजन अँड यू गो अहेड. सो तातूंत भितर तशें म्हजे कडेन झगडी करून किंवा आनी कितें तरी करून काय फायदो ना न्ही. बेजीक गजाल इतलीच की एक हातूंतल्यान शिकपाक मेळटा. एक डेटा पॉयंट्स म्हणून जितले आमकां जर्नलिस्ट म्हणून शिकपाक मेळटा ताच्या की 100 पटींनी चड तुमकां राजकारणी म्हणून शिकपाक मेळटलें, उमेदवार म्हणून शिकपाक मेळटलें. दुसरें, तुमकां इफ देअर ओनली इंटेंशन इज टू डिसमीस द डेटा अँड डिसमीस द सर्वे, डिसमीस इट, नो प्रॉब्लेम. हांवें कालय सांगिल्लें की जे पिकार आल्यात आय डोंट ब्लेम देम म्हणून. फॉर अस, म्हजे खातीर, निलेशा खातीर, इट्स अ व्हेरी फॅसिनेटिंग एक्सरसाइज टू नो वॉट पीपल आर थिंकिंग, हाव द स्टेट इज रिएक्टिंग टू लास्ट 5 years. And that's a very, very crucial thing for us as a journalist or academician. त्या आमदारा खातीर किंवा त्या उमेदवारा खातीर हो ताच्या निवडणुकीचो प्रश्न न्ही, जिखपाचो आनी हरपाचो प्रश्न. सो तांणी तें इल्लें चड मनार घेवप साहजीक आसा आनी तांणी तें चड मनार घेवन कितें म्हळेत म्हणून तें हांव मनाक धरना. For one simple reason ki it is a far more serious affair for them. It is not just an academic point for them, it is about their political career. But एक गजाल लक्षात दवरपाक जाय की तुमकां निवडून दिल्यात, तुम्ही लोकप्रतिनिधी, सो प्रत्येक मतदारसंघ तुमचे बेस्ट आशिल्ल्या भशेन वागनाकात. की अल्टिमेटली पीपल एक्सपेक्ट समथिंग फ्रॉम यू, एंड व्हेन पीपल आर टेलिंग यू समथिंग थ्रू अ व्हेरी एक्सटेन्सिव्ह कलेक्शन ऑफ डेटा आणि सॅम्पल, लिसन टू इट. If you don't want to listen to it, it's up to you. That's
I think
what I can say.
before I end the show, I want to ask this last question. Ki बरेच Nilesh, बरेच small parties are making inroads in Goa. Whether you want to consider TMC or as a small party or maybe a new entrant, all these new entrants, small parties, or there is a wave of certain organizations. कितपत हे डॅमेज करतले, कितपत हाजो इम्पॅक्ट जातलो in the elections to come 2022?
The voter today is so desperate that they are so upset. Yeah, I still remember a movie called Jai Ho, in which there is a Salman Khan dialogue which he says outside a police station in that typical Bollywood style कि इंडियन वोटर ये सोया हुआ शेर है, उसे जगाने की जरूरत मत करना. I mean, so don't do that. So it's a voter sentiment. Just take it, respect it. So the voter is basically trying to tell you that they are not happy with what is happening today. But the problem is they do not find an alternative. And because they are not finding alternative, they are trying to find solace somewhere. And so therefore you find this mushrooming of something. So for example, Pramod brought out a very important concept. He says that you are calling Manoj Parab as the chief ministerial candidate, but he doesn't even have a political party of his own. But that only goes on to show, I mean, what Pramod says is right, is that this survey is a very good indication to all the politicians that voter ये सोया हुआ शेर है. Just take care of that. That's it. Don't take that voter for granted, thinking that you will continue to do what you want, because the data tells you very clearly that they are desperately looking out for a change. Now you want to figure out whether you want to be that change or you want to be changed. Like Pramod said, the decision is yours. For us, it was a very fascinating learning and academic exercise. For Pramod, it was a journalistic exercise. For you, it is a concept of your political career.
I think Nilesh is a fantastic answer, both factual as well as in a Bollywood style. Nothing to be quoting Salman Khan on this show. Pramod, what are the political implications? जसे ताणे म्हटले की you want to see Manoj Parab as your CM candidate, but then again he doesn't have a party. You have new entrants like this. You have a 1 year old or 2 year old who has given serious thought to go in politics, is Aam Aadmi Party. You have traditional parties here also. You have other regional parties. हे सगळ्या खतखत्यान. How do you see this election 2022?
अजून मेरेन म्हाका दिसता की एक गजाल आमकां ह्या डेटांतल्यानय कळटा की मतदार इज वेईंग ऑल ऑप्शन्स. ताणें अजून डेफिनेट माइंड केलें ना की वोट कोणाक करपाचो तो. आमी त्या दीस प्रोग्रामाक म्हणिल्लें की बीजेपी इज अ क्विक लर्नर. सो तांणी सरकार तुमच्या दारी बी उपक्रम सुरू केले. आणि सध्याची जर विरोधकांची परिस्थिती जर पळयली जाल्यार विरोधक सद्याक सरकार भाजपच्या दारी व्हरतात काय कितें अशी परिस्थिती दिसपाक लागल्या. हे आमी त्या दीस उलयल्ले. म्हाका एक होप ह्या डेटांतल्यान दिसता. आय डोंट नो वेदर स्टॅटिस्टिकली आय कॅन प्रूव इट, बट वन होप दॅट आय फील इज कन्सॉलिडेशन जातलें. खंयचे तरी एका पर्यायाचे वटेच्यान कन्सॉलिडेशन जातलें. आतां बीजेपीचो वोट शेअर हो बीजेपी कडेन उरतलो, तो कितलो विरोधक फुडपाक शकतात हें पळोवचें पडटलें. अदरवायज बीजेपीचो कन्सिस्टंटली तो 35% जो वोट शेअर आसा तो बीजेपी बरोबर उरतलो. I think that is what we can safely assume now, unless something dramatic happens and it breaks away. But otherwise, जो उरिल्लो 65% आसा, 65% आसा, I have a hope that it will consolidate towards something. Because एक गजाल लक्षांत येता हातूंतल्यान की लोक, जनता सुज्ञ आसा, सुजाण आसा, आनी जें कितें घडटा ताजी प्रत्येक मतदाराक खोलायेन जाणीव आसा. सो ताका लागून फाल्यां बेश्टेच पक्ष आयले गोंयांत अळमी कशी आनीकय येतले म्हणून लोक आपले मत फुटपाक दितले काय कितें म्हाका सद्याक ह्या डेटा भितर लोकांनी जी एक रॅशनॅलिटी दाखयल्या फोर्थरायटनेस दाखयला आणि त्याच बरोबर एक क्लियर कट सिग्नलय दिला आय फील दॅट द कन्सॉलिडेशन मे हॅपन म्हळ्यार एक वेळ आमचे राजकीय पक्ष शेण खायत जनता शेण खावची ना
सरकार तुमच्या दारी हो जो एक उपक्रम सरकारान सुरू केला देर इज अ लॉट ऑफ मॉकरी गोईंग अबाउट इट म्हणजे सरकार तुमच्या दारीत सरकारान हाडूकूच ना म्हणजे तुम्ही जर सगळे पोस्टर्स बी पळयले जाल्यार दे आर कॉलिंग यू एट अ पर्टिक्युलर टाउन हॉल अँड यू हॅव टू लीव युअर हाऊस अँड गो टू दॅट टाउन हॉल फॉर सो अर्लियर यू वूड गो टू द गव्हर्नमेंट ऑफिस नाव यू आर गोइंग टू गो टू द टाउन हॉल म्हणजे अजून सरकार तुमच्या दारी पावलेत ना they tried to copy the home delivery services of Aam Aadmi Party in Delhi, but in reality what is happening on ground is that they are actually calling you out of the house and making you gather at some particular place, which actually is not sarkar tumcha dari in real sense of the term. So I just thought of telling you this because that was again another some of the sentiments that some of the people from the constituency came back and told to me. So I just thought that's very interesting. So I shared.
Okay, thank you, Professor Nilesh. Pramod, thank you for joining on this show at a very short notice. एक बरी गजाल की जशें निलेशान म्हटलें की सरकार तुमच्या दारी जरी तुमच्या दारी पावले ना बट येता त्या काळान तुमचो आतांचो सद्याचो आमदार आनी जे एस्पिरंट आहा ते तुमच्या दारी परत परत येतले तुमकां याद करपाक की तांकां मतां दिया आनी तांकां जिखून हाड ते तेन्ना तुमी कितें विचार करून मतां घालतली हे तो तुमचो विशय आमचो ह्या कार्यक्रमांतल्यान दॅट इज स्पेक्स मोजो सी द डिफरन्स प्रेझेंट्स मूड ऑफ द स्टेट इन एसोसिएशन विथ राजदीप बिल्डर्स ह्या कार्यक्रमाच्या माध्यमांतल्यान ह्या सर्वेच्या माध्यमांतल्यान सेंटिमेंट तुमच्या मुखार हाडपाचो प्रयत्न आमी केलो हो सेंटिमेंट कितको कन्वर्ट जातलो इन टर्म्स ऑफ वोटींग हो येता तो काळ दाखयतलो आनी मोर इम्पॉर्टंटली वेदर यू अग्री वेदर यू डिसअग्री वेदर यू fully accept the survey or partly accept the survey. I think the findings are in public domain. तुमकां विचार करपाचो आसा राजकारण्यांक विचार करपाचो आसा की फुडली दिशा कितें आसतली आनी मोर इम्पॉर्टंटली वोटरांक डिसायड करपाचें आसा की तुमची दिशा काय दशा कितें जातली ह्या एका पॉयंटाचेर हांव कार्यक्रम सोंपयता थँक्यू व्हेरी मच जेंटलमॅन फॉर जॉयनिंग ऑन दीस व्हेरी स्पेशल शो तुम्ही पळयत रावात प्रुडंट